during our T0. We could see the rain on Dragon's windows, and Kiko's team made an awesome call to slip it. And we went on the next go, which, as I understand it, Kiko was truly kind of threading the needle, right?
Yeah, no, I mean it's hard to describe the call that was made. I mean, we were mere seconds, maybe a minute away from committing to that first T0. Actually, we had kind of all agreed, okay, we're going for it, and then we, as a minute or two ticked off the clock, we got a couple more radar scans, and this cell was popped up, and we had the launch weather officers from the range kind of giving us a 50-50, and then we had the SpaceX meteorologist also on, and he was ultimately like, I recommend we slip, which ended up being a great call, because had we stayed on that first T0, we would have scrubbed. And it's not clear if we would have
So
gotten
this
recovery
is
with.
I made an audible at the last second. There's a Twitter Spaces with Isaacman and Kiko and a bunch of other people at SpaceX here. Want to listen to that? So let's jump in and listen.
For being ready. Jared, I actually had a question for you. It was 2 weeks of downtime, basically. You guys, and then we went from uncertain to launch to like, okay, tonight's the night. Maybe I would be curious to hear from you guys on kind of your mental prep and sort of, I don't know if it was an emotional roller coaster, but just general your guys' feelings, how we went so quickly from every day being a delay to, all right, we're in it now.
Yeah, I mean, Kiko, I think we were great. We felt bad for the families and all the guests that had come out. And we know a lot of people were psyched up for it. Like, we get to go to space. We have unbelievable objectives. Like, we're totally charged up about it. So don't worry. We kept busy. We were running and studying and flying and staying sharp for it. And but we certainly felt bad for those that traveled great distances and might not, weren't necessarily able to make it back. But we were basically postured for a 30-hour go time, and when you guys delivered it, we were ready. And an awesome job, making that right call. And it's kind of unique, right? Because in a lot of ways, we were kept on the ground because we didn't have good landing weather, which is not necessarily a problem for the space station. But on the flip side, they have an instantaneous launch window. They would have had to hit that
Curious
mark
as to
when the weather developed, and they would have lost that day. But you guys were able to do something
Maybe.
totally unique, since like literally the shuttle days, of slipping a T0 and being able to take that second go and ultimately get us off the pad before the weather came in again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a really unique mission design in that sense. And it was so critical to have the 3 individual T0s, especially in the summer months. One more thing to stress about, in a lot of ways, having an instantaneous window is quite nice, because you just don't worry about the weather, because it's going to be what it's going to be, and you don't get forced into the hard decisions like we had to do that night. But yeah, it worked out, and now we get to talk about all the success on the other side.
Yeah, and just a reminder for everyone, like those T0s, even though I know it was like hard to stay up if you're, I guess, really anywhere in the U.S., it was pretty late at night, were designed for the best chances to avoid micrometeoroid debris, which was a reality of kind of the environment we were flying into, and good comms, for our EVA and just, solar pointing and such. So it was very specific, but we did have another shot at it. I will say, like, big picture, we went into this with 3 main objectives. High apogee pass, learn about that high radiation environment, come back down, do an EVA, test out Starlink, and do about 40 science and research experiments and come home safe. Every one of those boxes were checked. So we're all like super excited about it. And now we'll kind of drill into like the play-by-play here a little bit, which is, launch and liftoff, if Kid wants to take us through that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brooke. Let's talk launch day. It's game time. Before I do that, it's worth mentioning and this is a common theme you're going to hear constantly from us, because we sincerely mean it. We and the team have dedicated the last 2.5 years to this mission, to train and prepare ourselves for the milestones we established. In all honesty, there was a lot of highs and lows that we experienced throughout training. There was delays, but it's a developmental mission. So it was necessary because the team wasn't going to launch us until we were 100% ready with our safety as the top priority. But to get us to this point took the entire SpaceX organization committing the resources necessary, as well as developing innovative technology to get us to launch day. So, granted, we got center stage when the rocket launched, but there are so many men and women, some of the most intelligent engineers that I've ever met behind this project that deserves all the credit in the world for getting us to launch day. As far as the phase of the day, we got up to throughout quarantine. We had some highs and lows, but eventually we got to the day of launch. Once we got the go ahead, it was the last opportunity to kind of interact with our families before we had to say goodbye. And it's worth mentioning the sacrifices that all our spouses and families had to make over the years for us to participate in this project. And we're just the lucky ones. There are plenty of people that could fulfill this role, and that's a point worth emphasizing, is that this is just one chapter. There's so many sequential chapters that will advance space exploration. But at this point in moment, it was us, and we wanted to rise to the occasion, and we only were able to do that with the support of our families. So once we said goodbye, it was time to proceed to suit up. And throughout suit up, this was the last opportunity for human interaction, more or less, getting suited for this launch. And then we headed to the tower and got strapped into the capsule. Once they closed that hatch, we're starting to reflect on our subjective experiences and what it felt like. And this was the first time, you close that hatch and it's just us. And it's time to focus. And I compare it to, my experiences being a fighter pilot and going on a combat mission. There is immense 100% trust that you have in your wingman. And that's exactly what we have with this crew. Everyone knows, not only do we know our specific roles and responsibilities, but we also know each other's strengths and weaknesses. And the fact that we will ultimately hit these highs and lows, we need to be there to back each other up to ensure that, again, we have our safety in mind and execute the mission flawlessly. As far as the launch itself, holy cow, was this an intense ride. Thankfully, we had the experience of Jared in his previous mission to kind of give us this play-by-play as we hit these sequential milestones throughout the launch sequence. And he would give these kind of preparatory commands. Granted, we rehearsed them in training, but it's nothing compared to the real thing. All the senses are engaged. You feel the rocket from the sway before launch, and then the rumbling as it takes off from the pad. Loud sounds, and then you go through these sequential events that can surprise you if you're not aware. But thankfully, Jared would provide these inputs of here comes Miko. You're going to feel a thud and a thrust forward in your seat as you make these G transitions. And it was intense for sure. We progressed up to about 4.5 Gs prior to Miko separation. You get flown through forward in your seat and you go to 0 Gs. All of a sudden, the second stage lights and you're back to positive Gs. You build back up to that 4.5, and that's pretty intense. It's longer durations than you experience in a fighter jet, just based on energy depletion with a smaller aircraft. They're short waves of G forces, whereas in a rocket, you're heading in one direction. You got a heck of a lot of thrust, 1.7 million pounds of thrust. So you're going to sustain those Gs for a long time. So it's, you're along for the ride for sure on this one. And then that final separation with Seco, you go from that 4.5 Gs that you experienced for a couple minutes to 0, and now you're in 0 G for the next 5 days, and then it's game time. So it takes a little bit to adapt to the environment. It's a very austere world that we live in up there. You're having to deal with elements that we'll cover here in a second, but space fog, uh, visual sensations that it takes some adjusting to, the fluid shifting that's happening based on gravity, not pulling on those fluid in your body. All things that we'll cover, but have a direct impact on your ability to function properly from physical, mental, cognitively, emotional. These are all things that are unique to the environment that make it so so awesome. So with that, I will pass it off to Sarah Rook to talk EVA.
Sure. So I'll just open up really quick on the EVA. It was, actually, I'll have kind of Sarah, because she was behind the displays, give you the whole operations from kind of start to finish. Just saying, like for the part that I was in on kind of opening the hatch, just what an emotional experience, a sensory overload. There's the physical exertion, there's the pressure changes, the temperature changes, gets a little cold, and then of course the overwhelming visual sensation when when you see Earth with no kind of barrier between you other than the visor that's in front of you. So it's a lot of senses that come together, way more than my prior experience of just looking through the cupola on I-4, where it's an immense visual experience, but this was something else. And I guess I would also say, we were out there doing a mobility test. There's been about 600 EVAs in the history of human spaceflight. By all accounts, like what we were doing was on the lower end of the complexity scale. But what was so different and so special is like it was a commercial endeavor, right? It wasn't world superpowers. It wasn't taxpayers and contributing 4.5% GDP during the space race to make it come together. I mean, this is a privately funded endeavor that benefits all of humankind. And the end result is you got a suit now that works in space, and you got a lot of data, and you're going to bring that back home, and you're going to make better suits, and then better suits until you've got suits that people can use someday on the moon or Mars. So that's kind of just like my big picture overview of it. I'd love like Sarah to go in the details of how that whole venting operation worked, and from her perspective, the testing.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I'm going to back up a little bit because the preparation for the EVA started almost as soon as we arrived on orbit. Pretty much an hour after we were up there, we got the call that they were going to start the venting sequence. For this mission, because we don't have an airlock, we had to go through a pretty novel pre-breathe protocol where we slowly decreased cabin pressure over the first 45 hours of the mission and raised the oxygen concentration to start denitrogenating our system. So what's really interesting about this is not only are we launching into space and going through these early adaptations that happen to the human body as you're in space, but now you're also climbing a mountain on top of that as you slowly kind of descend, or you reduce your oxygen as you go down in pressure. So it was some really interesting, almost mountaineering sensations and experiences stacked on top of space adaptation. But we started that process and all the venting was going well. And then on flight day 2, we actually did the first on orbit pressurized checkout dry run of the EVA and the suits. So Jared and I got fully suited up, pressurizing in the suits, and went through a lot of the motions inside the spacecraft to understand whether we had missed anything in training, if there was nuances or differences that we really needed to understand before we could go outside. I think this was super interesting for both of us. There is no true pure analog for how you can train the microgravity environment. We came up with a really novel suspension system for training this particular spacewalk at SpaceX. And I would say that got us like 95% of the way there. But when we first suited up, there are just differences where you have unconstrained freedom of movement. And it was this really interesting opportunity to learn how we needed to move and what it would actually be like to move around in the spacecraft in these pressurized suits. So Anna and Kid kind of provided direction for all the motions we needed to do, capturing footage of this. We discovered some things about certain things like climbing out from under the displays was actually much easier in microgravity. We discovered some things that we needed to have different strategies for reaching seat restraints based on what we learned up there. So it was a really useful test on flight day 2 prior to stepping into the EVA operation. Then finally on flight day 3, once we had completed our pre-breathe protocol up until that point, we all got suited. We actually spent a long time configuring the capsule ahead of that to make sure everything was constrained, put away, nothing would be leaving the spacecraft with us. And then we all got suited up and pressurized on 100% oxygen for about 20-minute duration as the final phase of our pre-breathe before we were ready for capsule venting. I think the vent overall was probably one of the coolest experience across all 4 of us. So many sensations from as the pressure is leaving the capsule, you go through temperature changes. So as soon as the hatch was cracked, we all immediately felt the chill as the air started to leave the spacecraft. But got the hatch open. One of the things we had prepared for was that it was possible that there was too much outflow pressure from the suits that would make the hatch difficult to open via motor. And so we actually saw that. It's one of the scenarios we trained for, and we really quickly transitioned to Jared manually opening the hatch, which went just as smoothly as we had hoped. Before Jared was able to then proceed outside to start the test matrix. I think we can maybe, Jared, if you want to give some of your thoughts on actually stepping outside at this point, love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and that was Sarah, an awesome background, like bringing up the whole pre-breathe. You know, people think sometimes you just throw the helmet on and go outside like in the movies, but you know, you do that, you're probably going to be a little pain from deep. So important. Like I said, I know you and I both felt the same. Like we have a test matrix to get through. We have only so much time. You know, and really that's O2 consumable driven. You know, temperature wise was just awesome. You have a double flow cooling program, so I actually felt rather cool being outside. But I think you just go through the test matrix and try and you know, get the good data back so that, you know, informs future vehicle design. You know, the one thing I'd say is like looking at Earth was obviously very, very special, and more special than I think you could ever get outside the window because of all those extra senses. But when you look off to the side and you look out into the, you know, the darkness of space, and you see kind of your spaceship there and how gritty it looks and stuff, it gave you this sense of like, this isn't going to be easy. Like this is a hard, very threatening environment. Like it wasn't, I would describe as peaceful when you're looking out in the darkness of space. I think if anything, it was a little bit more of like, you know, if you want to be here, you're going to have to work for it. And I know when we all huddled up and talked about it and some analogies to it, you know, it was like, you know, this is probably what it was like, you know, in the 1400s and such, when you're looking across the Atlantic and am I going to go off the end of the earth? Or the simple reality is, if you don't know weather and whatnot, the ocean is dangerous, right? Or climbing a mountain. And the reality is a lot of people tried to get to the summit of Everest, and it wasn't easy because it's a hostile environment. So from my feeling of it, it's like you shouldn't interpret that that feeling of danger and unwelcomeness as a deterrent, but it's just more to rise to the challenge, just as explorers had to do throughout human history. But you know, I'd love your thoughts.
Hey, while I got you guys too, Jared, one thing on this topic is, you know, from our view, you couldn't like see any stars, right? And then when we went into eclipse, the Earth was pretty black. But I am curious, could you see all the stars, right? Were you able to see all the things? And you know, obviously you got your feeling on how it made you feel, but you know, I'm just more curious what your view was.
So for me, exiting out in darkness, there was not a lot I could see. I could absolutely see the near vicinity of the vestibule and the light in there. But once I got out, kind of looking out of the horizon, I could barely see the blue arc of the earth. And it's really interesting. Depending on the lighting conditions, you either can or cannot see stars, and it's very different and very unique at times. But for me, I think I looked out, didn't see too much, and then was like, all right, let's step into the test matrix. And I imagine, Jared, you stepping out in daylight, did you see any stars?
No, I mean, there was still a lot of light. You know, the Earth has like a lot of light and energy that just comes off it, even as we were starting to head towards eclipse. So, I think that probably drowned out some of it. Now, at Kiko, we'll tell you there were some absolutely special orbits that we could recall where we had the aurora, we could see star fields out into the Milky Way. I
nuts.
mean, there were some impressive moments in the vehicle, but I think during the EVA between where we were at with
We went out of that
in our
thing,
orbit, it was either the darkness of space or it was Earth, and then we were just banging through the test matrix.
Yeah, Kippy, that's right.
Anything you want to add about closing the hatch, kind of the whole repress?
Sure, yeah. So then continuing on, we were both out there for kind of the amount of time available based on our available oxygen before it was time to come back in. We did kind of inspections of all of the sealing surfaces as well as the latching striker plates and hinge mechanisms on the hatch to make sure we were good. I did see a couple kind of bulges in the hatch seal, which was totally expected and something we had also planned for and accounted for. Push them in just to make sure we would get a really good seal on the hatch. And then we did have a successful hatch motorized closure of the hatch once we were back in the vehicle. And from there, the repress sequence was really smooth. The nitrogen repress system performed exactly as expected. And I think one of my points right after we got back to the nominal environment was how perfectly we ended exactly where we had hoped for. There was some discussion of we might end up with higher oxygen and we'll have to just wait as nitrogen backfills, or we end up with too much nitrogen and refill with more oxygen. There's a lot of different paths the atmosphere can end up on, but it was like spot on accuracy for what we had hoped for environmental parameters before we were able to depress the suits and come out. I think many people were curious about whether we could actually smell space in any capacity and what that smelled like. And I think between the bake out of our spacecraft in vacuum ahead of this mission, there was not a lot left. And so actually when we repressed the spacecraft, it smelled pristine. It was in very, very fresh air in the spacecraft. So maybe that's kind of the overview of the spacewalk, unless anybody wants to add some other thoughts.
So freaking cool.
So we had a lot of science and research to go through, and that's what we filled our time with in between the gaps. So Anna, maybe you could take us through some of that, and then even go into kind of your what you did with your book you authored.
Sure thing. All right, so the science and research, we packed our 5-day schedule with about 40 science and research experiments. So every moment that we weren't executing on one of those other major mission objectives, we were executing science and research pretty much. So there's a lot to learn for a future where you have thousands of people living in space. And so we tackled a lot of that learning as a part of this science. When you think about it, we were all born into 1G. And so when you go into 0G, lots of things change. There's bone density loss, there's vision issues, there's severe motion sickness, and we don't have answers to all of that. So it was really important to gather data from that. And I tell you, when we entered microgravity for the first time, we got on orbit, I got to experience that adaptation to space firsthand, and it impressed upon me even more the importance of gathering this data. If we want this future where there are thousands of people living in space, it is critical that we learn as much as we can to get there. So let me talk through some of the highlights from these science experiments. Like I mentioned, there are a lot of changes to the eyes that happen in space. So if you think of a future where we take a 9-month mission to Mars, you land on the surface of Mars, vision changes in astronauts. If you get there, you can no longer read your procedures, you can no longer do your work effectively because your vision has changed so significantly. That's a problem. So we tackled in a number of our experiments these vision changes to better understand the mechanisms behind them, what's going on, and try to learn from it. So for example, we wore these contact lenses that measure the intraocular pressure in our eyes and allow us to gather continuous data over extended periods of time, inspecting that intraocular pressure. So when you get into space, there are fluid shifts, the pressure inside your head and thus your eyes increases, and that pushes, oftentimes creates kind of a flattening of your eye in the back, and it changes things like your axial length. So when we were gathering this data, we were able to inspect over different time points, you know, when is this axial length changing? How dramatically is it changing? Um, and, you know, historically on space flights, people have been able to gather specific time points of eye data. So you might gather a time point at launch plus 30 days, for example. But this allowed us data over extended periods of time, for example, 8 hours, to really see how our bodies and our eyes especially are adapting to microgravity. So that was super neat. Another thing we tackled was a lot of ultrasounds. So we had multiple ultrasound varieties that were really portable. One was a butterfly ultrasound, and another was an ultrasound that allowed us. It was a novel three-dimensional ultrasound device that allowed us the ability to inspect the optic nerve sheath. So this, as a part of those eye changes that happen in space, one of the things that the measurements that helps us better understand it is the optic nerve sheath, but it's often hard to measure and hard to get great images of. So this novel three-dimensional scan was a great, really easy to use and got great images really effectively. And it was built by a team of researchers. And so we put that to the test, got optic nerve sheath images over the course of time. And so we'll be excited to learn what the researchers see from that. But then we also use that other ultrasound probe I mentioned, the butterfly ultrasound, to inspect some other things. We looked at the bladder, we looked at the internal jugular vein, and some other areas to really see, you know, what are these changes that are happening to the blood flow in the body when you're in a microgravity environment, and what are the changes to your bladder and how its ability to process urine. So it was a great compilation of ultrasound imaging that we'll be sending back to the researchers to learn more. Then another experiment we did was something that inspected our airways. So airway interventions are one of the key pieces of an immediate emergency response here on Earth and our hospitals. We fortunately have never needed an airway intervention in spaceflight yet. But if you think to a future where there's thousands of people living on the surface of Mars, it's only a matter of time before an airway intervention is needed. So historically also, there has not been any imaging of airways in microgravity. And so it became clear that it's important to understand that environment, see if there are things like swelling happening there that could really change one's ability to respond appropriately in emergency when we need that sort of intervention down the road. So we did the first imaging of an airway through an endoscope in flight. Kit and I both stuck basically a camera or an endoscope down our nose through into our airways to get video of our airways to see if there's that swelling, and then we repeated that both before flight and post flight, to really compare those environments. And then finally, one more note that I'll touch on is a Tempest Pro experiment that we did. This experiment is something called, it's basically an ambulance in a box. It provides all sorts of diagnostic capabilities to support a patient in the environment of space. So things like vital sign monitoring, 12-lead ECG, as well as ultrasound are all provided by this box. But the extra neat thing about it is that it has Wi-Fi capabilities. So we were using it to also test the Starlink network, which is another major mission objective of our flight. And if you think to a future, if you can connect this device to the Wi-Fi and beam that back to Earth, the neat thing is that you can have experts on the ground real time looking at this data that's being collected by your crew in orbit and providing direct, immediate responses as to where to go in response to any sort of maladies that the crews are experiencing. So that's a brief glimpse of the full gamut of the research that we tackled as a part of this mission. And honestly, the research hasn't ended. We have continued to collect data over the last 48 hours. We've been here since splashdown, and we'll be continuing to collect a bit more in the days to come. So it's an action-packed set of work, and we'll be really thrilled to see what the researchers are able to do with the data.
That's awesome. Anna, do you want to also just go right into that really cool book reading?
Yeah, sure. So on flight day 2, I had the privilege of reading a book I co-authored named Kisses from Space. So Kisses from Space is the story of a mama dragon, and it is the story of her journey to space, and is the story of the power of love to overcome any distance. I
Curious thing.
co-authored the story with Carrie Vosick, and it is illustrated beautifully by Andy Hartness, and it was published by Random House. And I when I was thinking about going to this far distance from Earth, it became clear to me that I wanted to find a way to be able to connect with my kids back here on Earth during that time, and in creating this book enabled that for me. So, but something else that I really loved about this book was that it it was able to raise funds and awareness for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. As a part of this mission endeavor, we have raised over $250 million for St. Jude, and this book will continue to contribute to that. All of the proceeds from the co-creators go to this hospital and the important work that they do. So this on-orbit reading that we did, it was to my children as well as some of the brave patients of St. Jude, and the book that flew with me to space will be auctioned off after flight for the benefit of St. Jude as well. So it was a really special moment to get to connect with some really great kids back here on Earth, and it will continue to do great work for St. Jude in the future.
That's awesome, Anna. And that wasn't like our only like important communication undertaking during the mission. We also tested out Starlink laser links. Sarah, if you want to take us through that.
Sure. So one of our big mission objectives was actually testing out Starlink connectivity to the spacecraft. And I want to give a huge shout out to the entire Starlink team. This mission was not just about Dragon and about Falcon. It really required the entire SpaceX team. And this is in a number of ways. Both when you consider our orbit, we were flying through the Starlink constellation twice every orbit. So the entire Starlink team had to be a part of this because the Dragon's vehicle knowledge was actually available to the Starlink spacecraft, so they could avoid us as needed while we were on orbit. But that meant that there were GNC engineers for the Starlink team that were supporting 24 hours a day, monitoring our trajectories and watching our progress. But then also, you're now sending information over a beam of light to the spacecraft and from the spacecraft. And these are both spacecrafts, the satellite and Dragon, that are traveling at orbital velocities. So it's an incredible technology development. I think it is, we all experienced how much of a game changer it could be to have information share so easily with mission control. There was so much learning done because of Starlink being accessible on this mission. I think it's certainly for me one of the highlights of what came out of this mission for the future of spaceflight. But this was obviously one of our big mission objectives, was testing out this link for the first time. And there are, I mean, frankly, communication and connectivity is something that can transform the world. When you think about telemedicine, access to education, these are things that, if there is equitable access, you can change the world. And so it was incredibly important to us to share a message that could unite people and bring people together in the way that this technology can do. So I did have an opportunity to play a violin in space. It's one of my favorite perfect memories up there, seeing a wooden violin floating in this incredible 21st century spacecraft. The kind of the best imagery though for me is the people in front of me that are actually capturing it, floating around, chaos swirling around them with the cameras, trying to capture these views. It was so much fun to try and record music inside the spacecraft. I will also say it was a huge amount of work for the SpaceX team to actually enable a violin to go to space. Every single thing in our spacecraft had to be baked out prior to the mission, and go through extensive testing to be qualified to support the vacuum. And so we did have to put violins into the vacuum chamber and then into toxicity testing to understand how much material was left that could off gas on the instrument. We had to actually fly a short bow. So I was playing with a quarter size bow because we couldn't fit the full length bow. We had to be very careful about how much rosin flew. It was very specifically measured. We quantified exactly how much was needed to actually make sound. So we weren't bringing more rosin, which could be dangerous than necessary. There were so many pieces that were
So
required
cool,
to
dude.
actually make this work and make it happen.
That's awesome.
And what was really cool is we actually played it before the EVA and then we played it after. And the final recordings were actually done after the EVA, after the violin had survived through the vacuum of space, gone on that spacewalk with us, and then we were able to do that performance. It was so interesting to be able to play an instrument in space. When you're shifting on the violin strings, you have to move your hand a certain distance. And if you get that wrong, your intonation is off, you mess up the note, it's the wrong pitch. But as I was playing, the whole instrument is now moving. And so there was so many instances where you're just like trying to keep it still enough that you can actually play successfully. So
That's pretty good.
It was a really fun challenge. I think there's some hopefully good footage of the chaos of it trying to be captured as well. But it's absolutely one of my personal highlights from the mission.
I'm pretty sure I speak for all of us, Sarah, when I say you look like a total pro, and like you had it the whole time, and it was the sweetest thing ever. So, well done on that end. You made the image that we visualized in Starship come reality, which is super freaking cool, man.
Thanks, Kiko. Yeah, I don't think I could have picked a piece that meant more to me. I'm so incredibly grateful to John Williams that he allowed us to play Ray's theme from space. I think for so many space fans, it's the music that sparks your imagination and that creates all of these worlds that inspire
What a good
imagination.
time.
So it was incredibly special to be able to have that music with us on this flight.
Yeah, Sarah, you nailed it. Well, I think we'll go back to Kid to just take us through what recovery and splashdown was like, and a little bit of our life here over the last 2 days, which is kind of crazy to think because it feels like it's been a little bit longer. And then I think we've got some Q&A.
Jared, we did get Stu is also on now. I just saw. I think we got him. Stu, you there?
Hey guys.
Hey, Stu.
Great to chat with you.
So last but not least, we had to come home. We dedicated these 5 days to commit as much time, effort, and energy into doing the science and research, but eventually it was time to come home and reunite with the team and the families. There's a lot of preparation that went into the morning of recovery, just getting everything organized because, you're living in this zero-G environment and things like to float. So that was certainly a challenge and a lot of lessons learned on how to function in a zero-G environment. But once we were strapped in our seats, in our suits, we started the reentry process. And just like I commented about liftoff, having the experience of Jared to highlight those key milestones throughout the phase of that flight, that portion of the flight, really helped us out in anticipation of some of these events, like cloth separation. When those pyros fired, it was a pretty good thump, followed by trunk separation, which was even a bigger thump. And at that point, we're committed. So we started the reentry burn, and as we experience these, it's a testament to the team getting us trained right for these experiences. So we could anticipate and be prepared for what we were going to experience. Perfect example is, you're at zero G and you're deconditioned. From being on Earth, you're sitting at 1G. Up there, your 0Gs. It's just you're not using your muscles, ligaments, or tendons. You're simply just floating around with simple movements. And as you're deconditioned, you start to sense these positive Gs again. It's really difficult on the body, and it's only reinforces my opinion as far as what is valid training, and the centrifuge find these profiles in the centrifuge was huge. Even for someone who's flown fighter jets for over 20 years, it's a really critical element of our training. So we're very thankful to have these opportunities. Once we started that reentry process, things that were notable that we've kind of discussed is, we hit the blackout phase and the plasma started to cover the capsule, and it was just this pink hue that was kind of encapsulating the windows, and that only progressed into these flames, and it was just the most mesmerizing view of that phase. And unfortunately, there's only so much you can enjoy of it because of those G sensations. We ended up you end up pulling about 4.5 Gs, but from someone who's used to pulling 9 Gs in a fighter jet, this was a very, very intense part of the flight. Just because of that deconditioning and the durations that you experience, these 4.5 plus Gs. It's a good 6-7 minutes long. It's difficult to breathe. It's just pretty intense, but that's the nature of the business as far as the reentry of the altitude that we started at, and reaching Mach 27 on the reentry phase. But thankfully, again, a testament to the team. The drogue chutes popped out, and that was another good thump, followed by the chutes. We had a pretty good view of that on the displays, and a lot of reassurance, not only in the capsule, but everyone on the ground as well. And it was just a nice, easy float on down to the water. It splashed down, and the professionals on the recovery ship went to work to get us on board within, it felt like max of 30 minutes. And then the science and research started immediately. Literally walked off. You guys probably saw the footage from the telecast. We went into a medical bay and they started the test right away. And that's critical. That's what's kind of unique about our mission, is the accessibility that we provided in order to get this science and research accomplished. Some other examples is an MRI scan of our brain. Typically, those are done days after, based on resources and accessibility to the astronauts. But based on the profile that we had set up and the awesome team that ran our science and research program, shout out to those guys to make it happen. We were in a MRI machine within hours of splashdown to get those critical images right away, which is more or less the conditions and environment we were experiencing on orbit. So that's invaluable data that we're going to continue to dissect and analyze. And it still continues to this day. We're over 48 hours past splashdown, and we're pricking our fingers every couple hours, even during this call, to get the blood samples necessary to get the data that is going to be critical for future flights. Because just like Anna talked about, we selected these experiments based on identifying challenges associated with long duration space flight, because this is not the final chapter. This is just come to the conclusion of Polaris Dawn, but there's going to be many missions in the future that's going to help us further space exploration.
Hey, thanks, kid, for taking us through Splashdown. I just wanted to kick it back over to SpaceX leadership team. If you guys had any words, and then we'll do some Q&A while we got a little time left.
Hey, Jared, I can start. Really great to chat with you all. It was awesome to see reentry and splashdown a couple nights ago here. That's obviously the most important part of the mission for everyone. Getting you guys safe back on Earth and to your families is top importance. But it was awesome to chat through all the mission objectives today. You all nailed it up there. Absolutely nailed it. And it was amazing to be a part of the team on the ground and watching you through each phase of the mission. So happy to be chatting today with everyone safe and sound. But this mission was totally badass. And yeah, just wanted to congratulate you all on a successful flight.
That's Stu Keach talking.
Yeah, I just want to say, this is John. I just wanted to say thank you guys for pushing us.
I don't know.
I think it's really important, and it's one of our core values at SpaceX to keep pushing the envelope, keep pushing ourselves, And in doing so, it kind of forces us to innovate and be creative and develop new technology that'll be useful in the future. And I think your mission particularly really pushed the envelope and pushed us. And I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Yeah, and I'll maybe just close with, I had the privilege to spend a lot of time with your families while you guys were, going through the pre-launch prep and then when you were on orbit. And, we talk about you being champions, your families were actually also incredible champions. And were extremely supportive, and we're so thankful for us. And it was a privilege and honor, not only to just work with you guys, but to be side by side with them and to get to know them. It hit home for me personally, watching you guys say goodbye and then also saying hello again. It makes all the hard work worth it. So thank you to you and your families for your trust.
Hey, yeah, Kiko, John, Stu, thanks for all the great words. Look, this is human spaceflight is not routine. We all know the grand goal, and a mission like this with so many objectives, like it's they don't go perfect. Like there's a lot of things leading up to the mission. There's a lot of things on orbit, and we have like 100% complete confidence, like the transparency of what's going on and when, the information that gets funneled up to us, or when we were here on the ground discussing in meetings, like you feel like you literally have the brightest minds in the world that are highly focused on achieving our objectives and then just moving the ball forward. So again, just an expression of sincere appreciation. And I think with that, I know we probably don't have ton of time. Maybe we can go a little bit long. Let's do some Q&A, Snap.
Good snap. That's John Kraus, man. If Snap decides to snap. John, hello?
Hey, Felix, Rook, com check. Felix, Rook, com check.
Jared, he may have, I don't see him on anymore. Stu or John, do you guys have any questions? Otherwise, I can ask one.
I got a question for Sarah. I'm also a musician, and seeing your performance in space just like blew my mind. It was so awesome. But I was curious, did the violin sound different to you? I mean, I know you said you had a shorter bow, and it was probably kind of more challenging to hold in position. But also just thinking about the pressure in the capsule and whether or not it, just curious if it sounded different to you in any way.
That's a great question. I would say it not too much. I did have to retune a bunch of times to make sure I was actually maintaining intonation. And we also intentionally planned it between capsule vents so we wouldn't have any pitch shift during the actual recording. Playing with a shorter bow is obviously not going to produce the same tone. So it was maybe more muted than it would have otherwise been on a full-size bow. But largely it just sounded like a beautiful wooden instrument in that spacecraft.
Right. I had a question for Jared. Kid talked about the pink hue of reentry and the plasma around the capsule. If I remember correctly, your reentry on Inspiration 4 was during the day as opposed to at night. Can you talk about the sensation differences, and did you still see that pink hue on Inspiration 4, and how is it different on Polaris Dawn reentry?
Hey, Stu. Yeah, we were actually talking about that, during reentry amongst the crew up there. That you could, it was night and day difference, quite literally. I mean, the entire capsule was initially glowing orange. Like it was it was much more notable, and starting at around 100 kilometers. So in Inspiration 4, I feel like it was in that 70 kilometer range when we started to see like the fluorescent lights, but they were streaky. they were only occasionally kind of zorching past the windows versus,
Discovery, going throttle
almost
up.
nearly at 100 kilometers, the vehicle was glowing orange. And then as we got into like
Station.
that, 60, 70
Sorry.
kilometer regime, you started to see some of the fluorescence as well. But no, it was much, it was a much cooler show. You probably saw we turned the lights down in the cabin to get a better view on the way down.
That's pretty cool. I do want to say we're still doing data review, obviously, but you all deorbited from an apogee of right around 460 kilometers, which is at the edge of the design space that Dragon was designed for. So I think you all experienced the highest energy reentry that Dragon 2 has ever seen. And so the team is really excited to go do the detailed inspections of the thermal protection system and all of the parts of the heat shield and the exterior of the capsule. And it's going to be great data to understand kind of what looks different there for the additional heat load that we saw.
Yeah, super cool, Stu. We're super interested in that data as well, and kind of excited about the debriefs that are coming up. But that's awesome. It just unlocks more capabilities for Dragon, right? I think we'll give Felix another shot here. So Felix, Rook, Comcheck.
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Loud and clear.
Wonderful.
Fire away with your question, man.
Thank you so much. Welcome back to Earth, Jared, Scott, Sarah, and Anna. What a truly amazing mission, and thank you for taking the time out of your day here to talk all about it here on X. As mentioned a few days ago, Starlink was at times used as an alternative as mission control comms. So this question's for Jared. How did the connection and communications compare to when you went up with Inspiration 4? Thank you so much.
I think we would all be united in saying that the Starlink connectivity for mission support purposes was unbelievable. When you've got commercial missions up there, they aren't the highest priority for, TDRS and ground stations. And I'd say like on kind of the traditional infrastructure, I mean, we'll find out in the debrief, but I bet it's like somewhere in the 70% comm coverage range. So having Starlink, along with like, two brilliant SpaceX engineers in the crew that have, connectivity back to their coworkers in mission control was just unreal, unreal access. So it's a great question. I mean, clearly this is going to be part of the future of human spaceflight when you've got armadas of starships up there.
And Felix, maybe just like one little analogy, there were times when we were having issues with a procedure or something like that. And instead of going back and forth on comm to try and triage, we would just FaceTime and we could get the answers immediately from the support team on how to solve the issue, resolve the issue, and then go from there. So
You gotta be kidding me.
Such a cool tool to assist with mission execution.
Dude. That's actually super neat. Pro Pilot. Hey, thanks for the raid, man. Going on, aviators? Oh,
okay, we're gonna try and bring up the next
Mr. Gibbons rating. Gibbo, what's up, man? Dude, we're listening to an X Spaces post-flight press conference with the Inspiration 4 crew. Thankfully, they're giving me a little bit of dead air to talk right now. This has been super, super cool. If you guys didn't know, Inspiration 4 was a 5-day all-commercial mission to space that took place last week that involved the first commercial EVA. It was wild, man. Did I say Inspiration 4? Yeah, Polaris. Sorry.
Okay, Will Robinson Smith, Comcheck.
Flight now.
Loud and clear.
I need more coffee.
We have you loud and clear.
Anyway, thanks for the raid, boys.
Thanks so much again for taking the time to do this with us. Question, I suppose, for you, Jared and Stu, and Sarah as well. In the learning that was gathered from the spacewalk this time around, and some of the things you're looking forward to, looking ahead to the second Polaris mission, what are some of the things you want to see in the evolution of the suit by that next flight? If you've already started thinking about what you want to have that element look like in the demonstration capacity. Thanks.
Over to you, Stu.
I think one of the biggest things that we were talking about throughout the mission is how much preparation is required to get into the EVA. So as soon as the capsule got to space, we vented the atmosphere and started through the pre-breathe protocol. And then even before the EVA on the webcast, you all saw some waiting time prior to opening the hatch where we're flowing pure oxygen to wash out the nitrogen inside the suit. So I think one of the things we've talked about with the Polaris team and with the spacesuit team at SpaceX is kind of the holy grail of spacesuits is that zero pre-breathed suit where you have to make no modifications to the atmosphere and you just put your suit on and you pressurize it and vent the capsule down and open the hatch or step into the airlock and open the airlock hatch. So I think the next evolution of the suit, we certainly have some data review to go. We have to get the full debrief from Jared and Sarah, Kit, and Anna. Since this was a 4-person spacewalk, everyone was exposed there. So a lot of great data to get there, but I suspect something to improve the operational flexibility of the suit and the operation as a whole is going to be part of the next block upgrade for SpaceX.
Thank you.
Okay, Michael Seeley, ComCheck.
ComCheck, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right, so I just want to congratulate the team. This was just a magnificent mission. It was such a joy to be adjacent to. I have a very specific question for Sarah. So the performance was great, and even some of the most sort of cold-hearted people who were only just sort of space adjacent were really wrapped into the passion of the performance. So I just have a very specific question. What happens to this space-flown violin now? Will you be able to play it just like you always have? Does it go on a shelf someplace? Yeah, what's the history or the future of this violin?
Good question.
That's a great question. I would love to play it again. I hope we're reunited soon on Earth. But actually, this instrument is going to get auctioned off for St. Jude. So ultimately, it will hopefully benefit the great work they are doing there. So
Good call.
if you're interested, I know stay tuned for some of the items that will get auctioned off.
Who do we bring up next?
Oh God, check the bank account. That's great, man. They raised 250 million for St. Jude from this mission. That's fantastic.
And we just sent out a request
Just
to Jack Byer.
hey, there's my boy. Yak.
Hey, Jack, Rook, ComCheck.
Jack, don't frick it up.
Jack, Rook, ComCheck, and unmute.
Me, 1, 2, 3.
All right, loud and clear. Go with your question.
Yeah, congratulations, as everyone has been saying.
That's my
absolutely
buddy.
phenomenal mission. It really felt just amazing. I can imagine what it was like back in the Apollo and Gemini days. I have an annoying question. This is a post-mission briefing. You guys just got done with this mission, so I'm just going to preface this by saying this is probably annoying, and I apologize. But the question is, this was so amazing. You proved that you could do this. Any sort of inkling into what you were thinking of doing with Polaris next? We would love to know what's going to happen on Polaris 2 or 3 or anything. I mean, we've given us sort of broad outlines in the past, but any more specific details would be amazing. I hate to be the guy that's like, hey, you just did this amazing thing. What else are you going to do? But the question is burning and I have to ask it. And thank you again for doing everything that you've done. It's truly outstanding.
Yeah, look, I get it. But I'll tell you the answer is it goes kind of hand in hand with what we're doing right now, right? So we always said Polaris 2 would build off of what we learned from Polaris Dawn, and we still got to go through all of the data from this mission. There's a lot of debriefs. Stu pointed out before they've got to do an extensive data review off of everything we got from the EVA suit. So that's the whole thing we got to do now, right? We're going to engage publicly too and share the what we experienced on this mission, because that's always one of the obligations of human spaceflight. But, when we put like the mission hat back on, we've got to debrief, we've got to learn from this. And based on what we learned, then it becomes, what's in the realm of possible to build on this for the next mission. So, we'll be excited about it when we're ready to have that conversation. We'll certainly share at some point, but yeah, for now, and it's probably an equally annoying answer back to you. Like we got to stay on mission until it's done.
No, that's not annoying at all. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of more work to be done just to analyze all of the data that you guys have pulled and all of the science and everything you've learned about Dragon and the suits. So thank you once again. Really appreciate everything you guys have done, and just keep it up. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay. So Brooke Edwards, ComCheck.
Hey, Rook, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for doing this. Congratulations on the great mission. Anyway, I think this might be more for Stu or Kiko, but I was wondering, what is the next big milestone you want to see with the EVA suit?
I just messaged Jack. I go, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Few steps that we want to see. Certainly, we want enhanced mobility. We want the operational flexibility to reduce the pre-breathe protocol so that it's easier to enter and exit vacuum. I think another thing that goes without saying is in the future on the moon and Mars and for future surface suits, we need a backpack or some type of portable life support system, and you can't always be tethered to either your vehicle or rover or your habitat there. So part of what that entails is using a liquid cooling garment and having a full recoverable system for that life support backpack. The Apollo suits and the EMU suit up on ISS and all of those kind of independent life support suits utilize a liquid cooling garment versus the open loop gas flow that we used on the Polaris Dawn mission. So I would suspect that a block upgrade would be some combination of all of those, perhaps a higher pressure capable suit, some mobility enhancements based on the feedback from the crew when we get through data review. And then whether it's the next iteration or one after that, I think we need to continue along that roadmap of being more efficient with consumables towards that true like independent suit that we'll need someday when we're on the surface of Mars.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yes, success. Nice.
Abby, Rook, ComCheck.
I hear you 5x5. How me?
Loud and clear.
All right, great. Well, first of all, congratulations to all of you. I think, the whole world was excited by what you did. I especially wanted to say congratulations to Anna and Sarah. And my question is for the two of them. As SpaceX employees, I'm sure you wanted to go into space probably for a long time before starting at SpaceX, and your family probably knew about that. My question for you, if you're willing to share, for folks like your parents, if they're still around, or your siblings, what did they say to you after you came back down, having accomplished this, awesome thing, if you're willing to share?
I think for me, this is Anna. My family was just thrilled to have me back. I think they, like you said, they knew that this was a dream of mine from a very young age, and they've also been a part of the journey to be a part of NASA and SpaceX's missions and contribute as a part of those teams. And so I think, they've been along for the ride for all of these years, and I think they were thrilled to see the work that the teams accomplished together through this, and then thrilled to have me home.
Yeah, I think similar sentiment for my family. It's frankly the harder job. Our parents are here on the ground. Our families were here waiting for us to get home and following along in the mission. So they were really doing the hardest work during the mission, and coming home and giving them the biggest hug as soon as we got off the helicopter was such a highlight to be able to hold them again. And I think they were all so happy and so equally inspired with everything that had happened. I think it was a journey following along here as well. But just very, very grateful to see them and hold them and have them back with us.
Thanks. Congratulations again.
Scott Schilke, Rook Comcheck. And you go to unmute, Scott.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. And congratulations to the entire team. Can
I just say that Rook is managing this press conference and also like a panelist in the press conference, and he's doing a damn good job at that. Sorry, I didn't mean to mute this guy's question, but
how was it on gripping on the handholds, getting your foot into the footholds, and bending, twisting, using like a screwdriver? How was that compared to how you trained?
Freaking legend right there.
Hey, great question. Thanks. I think overall the performances.
Hey, you dropped the mic. Gotta get EVA shots now.
Maybe. Oh, awesome. Sorry, I got distracted by the sound. I think overall the suit performed nearly identical to as in the initial pressurization when we didn't have as large of a delta on the suit. Movement seemed really, really easy, easier than in the gravity environment on Earth. But then as we got to full pressure in the suits, it was pretty much exactly the same. We have really good rotation. Bending joints were phenomenal. I think there's more to learn on the foot mobility aid design. We were able to engage our feet, but I think there's a lot of improvements that can be made for future hands-free kind of securing of the feet. But overall, like, huge shout out to the suits team. Brilliant engineers at SpaceX that have been working on the suit for the last couple of years, and it performed spectacularly. These were our little spaceships for the duration of the spacewalk. And it was an immense honor to get to test them out in, space.
Nuts that actually is.
I concur completely. I think that in a lot of ways it was either exactly the same as we trained. You know, there were a couple things that were even better, and then I think some areas like, you know, we knew that foot restraint would, you know, was going to be a coin toss, and that was one that could have, you know, probably could be better. But, you know, in terms of our objectives for it, we got everything that was needed. Okay, we're going to go to the last question to Joey Roulette, and that'll be our final question today for the Spaces.
Joey Blackjack, what do you got, buddy?
Joey Comcheck.
Hey, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Cool. I guess this one's either for Sarah or Jared or maybe Stu. Do you guys plan to use these spacesuits on the moon under the Artemis program? I know there's a lot of talk about, you know, having these eventually go on the moon or Mars, but I'm just curious what it'll take to actually get there and whether you plan to work with NASA on that in the future.
Yeah, it's a good question. So for the Artemis program for HLS in particular, SpaceX is making the IVA suits. So the crew will wear suits that look very similar to what we currently use in Dragon. In fact, it will likely utilize technologies from our current IVA suits and the EVA suit from Polaris. So kind of playing to what Jared was talking about, that this whole mission is a springboard to develop technologies that'll feed into future projects and programs. SpaceX certainly has its own goals to get humanity to the moon and Mars. So at this point, we are not explicitly building the suits for the surface of the moon for the Artemis program, but we recognize that for Mars someday, we will need that. So I suspect that the technologies, especially for mobility that were demonstrated in the EVA this past week, are going to be hugely important for understanding exactly what that surface suit will look like someday.
Thanks.
All right. Hey, we're going to wrap this up. Look, just a massive expression of love and appreciation for everyone that kind of followed along our mission and cheered us on. We're really grateful. And as I mentioned, it's an important obligation for us to kind of share our experiences from this mission with all of you and get people excited about humankind's, you know, future among the stars. So thank you. Take care.
That was pretty good, man. Anyway, Mr. Gibbons, Pro Pilot, thank you for the raid, everybody. I appreciate it. Sorry, there's no way to pause those X Spaces conferences, so sorry about that. I do apologize. Guys, Mr. Gibbons is a great streamer. Pro Pilot, I actually don't know you, if you're still here. Hi.
Oh, this is space. I'm in space.
Van, what's going on? Pro Pilot, I'm gonna go out on a limb. Forgive me for presuming, but I'm gonna guess you were playing Flight Simulator. Jeez, look at all these resubs. Hey, human, I just saw your KSP modding video. Can I get in? Can I do modeling and texturing good and wanna? Can I get in? I can do modeling and texturing good and want to get back into modding KSP. Human, if you want to texture stuff, man, I'll think about it, dude. Oi! Bob. Does Bob look like the kind of person that would resub to this stream? No, it's Dave. Hello there. What's up, Bob? Merry Subiversary. What's up, man? Basically, now we just need to encourage them to go to Mars. Yep. Sarah Gillis violin vid with sound. I can't listen to it with sound. I will get destroyed by John Williams. He will come and Kalima Shakti De me. Yeah, we can't do that. Fortunately. Just in from work, old bean. Nice. You'll never be able to go to Disney again. Worth it to meet the man. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to get graped by Disney and John Williams. I don't want to do that. That would not make me comfortable. I don't think John Williams is the problem. It's the mouse. Oh boy, better give me money. Why don't you stop playing my music or I'll come over there. You shut your mouth before I put my foot in it. Oh boy. Am I dead now? Sorry. How cool was Max and D's shots of reentry? Pat is awesome. I am constantly humbled. Like, Jack just asked that question to Rook, right? Like, I'm not trying to take away from Max and D. Like, this is the point that I'm getting at. Jack just asked that question to Rook, and I'm like, I get some nasty imposter syndrome sometimes. I'm like, oh man, I know that guy. Like, I get super excited, to work with. There's some real talent at NSF. Max and D are great photographers, and I get to work with some pretty cool people, if I do say so myself. I get to work with some pretty talented folks, and it's amazing. It really I'm kind of taken aback at times. I'm like, huh. Wow, hey, I know that guy. He's talking to the guy he's talking to the other guy. I don't know that guy, but I know the guy that's asking a question. That's pretty cool. It's very humbling. It's good stuff. You should be fine, EJ, as long as you don't have a food allergy and stay away from Disney-owned restaurants. Excuse me, Mr. EJ, you are a big deal these days. You added the talent. Don't do yourself down or I will send Mickey for you. Oh boy. Oh boy. How's Titan doing? You notice how I called the Polaris Dawn capsule the Inspiration 4 capsule a second ago? I mean, to be fair, it is the Inspiration 4 capsule. But, yeah. Titan something was wrong. And here's the thing about having a dog. If something's wrong, they can't tell you what's wrong. So you have to figure it out. And let's just say I spent the better part of my night trying to figure out what was wrong. Yeah. He had some type of tummy ache or something last night, guys. Like, something. I don't know. I took him out to go to the bathroom when I leave stream like I usually do. Went to the bathroom and, I went, settled in, slept, got about an hour of sleep before he was pawing at me. Something was up, dude. Something was weird. So I was like, what's wrong? And he was just pawing at me when we were sleeping up on the bed. So I'm like, he doesn't do this unless something is wrong. Like, Titan's pretty good in that matter. He's gotten a lot better over the last couple of months. Like everybody was saying 3 months, and here we are 3 months in. He'll tell you exactly what's going on. Like, not exactly, but if something's wrong, he'll let you know. Like if he has to go to the bathroom, he will come up and he'll make a bark at you, but it's not a bark, it's like a woof. It's different. You learn to listen for the different tones in the barks, but he was like whining, like putting his paw on me and going, "No, hey, master, it's human, something's wrong, and I don't know what it is." So I got maybe about 30 minutes of sleep, and then I took him outside, and he went to the bathroom again, and, probably spent about 30 minutes outside at like 2, 3 in the morning. Then I took him inside, got settled in, turned on, Pole Barn. I think I was watching Pole Barn Garage last night or something. And 30 minutes later, same thing. Hey, something's wrong. So now it's like 3 in the morning, and I took him outside again. He peed again, no poop or nothing. Only pooped once at the beginning of the night, I guess. And then I brought him in again. And at 4 in the morning, same thing. I'm like, dude, this is not good. This is not good. Wookie, Wookie, exactly. You got to hear the tones. So I took him outside, and he started chasing bunnies at like 4 in the morning. So I put him on the leash that we have in the backyard, run around for like 30 minutes just chasing bunnies. And I'm just sitting there going, oh, this is gonna end so bad for me. And after like 30 minutes of him playing with bunnies, I'm like, dude, I'm going inside. He just kind of looked at me like, why are you going inside, human? I am playing with bunnies. And I'm like, dude, you need to get the frick inside, like right now. And yeah. And then I flipped on some older episodes of Grand Tour because, copium. And I probably didn't get to bed. Like, he wanted to play after that, and I wouldn't allow it, so he just kind of sat there whining at me until he fell asleep. And I fell asleep probably at 6 in the morning. And then Bree got up at 7:30 because she had to go to work. So there's that. And then the dog jumped up on my door at like 8 a.m. because he was hanging around with Bree, and then he decided he wanted to go back to sleep. So he jumped up on the door, crashed through it, opened it up because he can open doors because, of course, to the bedroom. And jumped on the bed and just put his head right on me. I mean, it was kind of cute, but not after that night. Not after that night. So, like, cumulatively, guys, I maybe got like 2 to 3 hours of sleep. Maybe. So, you know, that's good. Didn't really plan on doing that. My sleep schedule is still kind of messed up from Inspiration 4. So I was trying to go to sleep at a reasonable hour, but that didn't happen. I ended up making it way worse and going to bed at like 6, but that was because of the dog. But, you know, I woke up, took him outside before the stream today. It was fine, so. I thought you were talking about Ocean Gate for a minute. Doggy hugs for Titan. No. Oh, that's my dog. So, you know, there's that. Good prep for kids, I guess. Sure. Jeez. Yeah, I'm just not really with it right now. Coffee. Yeah, Super Fragger. Repost. Do you want the full recording of the whole Polaris space? About 60 megabytes. Nah, Dad, I got all the information I needed. I told Jack, if you guys didn't hear it, I sent him a message. I go, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. All right. Satisfactory time, huh? Let's do it. I'll